The winter wind moved like a quiet river through the tall pines, carrying cold air across the open land. Thomas Hale stood near his small canvas tent, tightening the straps on his horse's saddle so the animal wouldn't wake frightened in the night. The sky above him was heavy with clouds, and the moon peeked out from behind them every few minutes, casting a soft silver glow on the snow-covered ground. Thomas had been traveling alone for days, guiding a small group of horses he needed to deliver to a ranch 2 towns away. He planned to rest here for the night, away from the open trail, hidden near the edge of the forest. The place was calm, quiet, and far from any town noise. Exactly the kind of spot he liked. After feeding his horse and checking the campfire, he stepped inside his tent. The lantern inside glowed warmly, and he set down his gloves and hat. He stretched, feeling the tiredness of the day sink into his muscles. It had been a long ride, but he wasn't worried. He enjoyed the peaceful silence of the land. He didn't know the silence was about to break. Thomas had just poured himself some warm tea when he heard a soft crunch of snow outside the tent. Not the wind. Not an animal. Something else. He froze for a moment, listening carefully. His heart slowed down, not with fear, but with alertness. Living alone on the land had taught him to respect every sound. Another crunch, then a faint breath. Someone was outside. Thomas moved quietly toward the entrance of the tent. He didn't grab his rifle. He didn't believe in reacting too fast. Instead, he pulled the flap gently, just enough to see outside. What he saw made him pause. Standing in the cold, hugging herself tightly, was a young Apache girl. Her dark hair was wet from melted snow, and her blanket was so thin that it barely covered her shoulders. Her face was pale from the cold, and her hands trembled as she held the blanket close. Her eyes met Thomas's eyes, not with anger or threat, but with a deep exhaustion, like she had been running for days. Thomas stepped out slowly. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. The girl didn't answer at first. She looked at the tent, then at him, then back at the tent again. It was clear she didn't speak much English. She took one small step forward and pointed inside, and wrapped her arms around herself tightly to show she was freezing. Thomas understood immediately. "You're cold," he said softly. "You need warmth." She nodded quickly, her eyes pleading. Thomas didn't hesitate. "Come inside. It's warmer there." She slipped inside quietly, almost afraid to make noise. Thomas followed her and secured the flap. Inside, the lantern gave the tent a soft golden light, and the cold wind stayed outside. The girl stood near the center, still trembling, her eyes scanning the tent like she didn't know if she should sit or stay standing. Thomas picked up his extra blanket, unfolded it, and held it out to her. "Here," he said. "This will help." She hesitated for a second, unsure if she should accept. Then she took the blanket gently, her hands still shaking. She wrapped it around herself and closed her eyes briefly, as if feeling warmth for the first time in days. Thomas poured another cup of warm tea and held it out. She stared at it, then at him, before taking it with both hands. She sipped slowly at first, then a little faster as the heat traveled through her. Only after she drank half of it did she finally look at Thomas properly. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "Ayanna." Thomas nodded. "Ayanna," he repeated, making sure he said it right. "My name is Thomas." She nodded once. Her eyes softened a little, but he could see she was still scared. Thomas sat down slowly, leaving space between them so she wouldn't feel trapped. She watched him carefully as she lowered herself onto the ground. Sitting with her legs closed, the blanket wrapped tightly. For a while they sat in silence. Thomas didn't push her with questions. He knew she needed time. The lantern flickered softly, and outside the wind brushed against the tent walls like gentle hands. Slowly, the girl's breathing became steadier. Finally, she looked up. "Cold. Long time," she said slowly, pointing toward the woods. "Lost." Thomas listened carefully. Her English was broken, but he understood enough. "You got separated from your family?" he asked. Ayanna hesitated, then nodded. She pointed toward the north. "My people. Camp. I go for water then. Storm. She made a swirling gesture with her hand to show how strong the wind had been. Thomas imagined a sudden snowstorm hitting her while she was alone. If she had walked too far, she might have lost her way back. He could see the exhaustion on her face. She must have been wandering for hours, maybe even longer. You're safe now, he said gently. Rest. Warm up. Ayanna nodded, but her eyes kept drifting to the tent entrance. Even while warming her hands around the cup, she kept glancing there, like she feared something or someone might come. Thomas noticed. Are you worried someone followed you? He asked. Ayanna did not speak, but she placed her hand on her chest and closed her eyes for a moment, as if remembering something painful. Then she shook her head quickly, trying to push the memory away. Thomas didn't press further. Instead, he placed a small tin plate with bread and dried fruit in front of her. She stared at the food, hesitating, then took a small bite. She was careful, almost shy but grateful. Minutes turned into an hour. Slowly, Ayanna's shivering eased. Her shoulders relaxed. Her face softened from tension to relief. But then, something unexpected happened. A sudden gust of wind hit the outside of the tent and Ayanna jumped, her hand reaching for something beside her. She didn't grab anything, but the movement was sharp, instinctive. Thomas watched her closely. This wasn't just fear of the cold. Something else frightened her. Something she didn't want to talk about. She finally looked up at him, her eyes serious. Bad men, she whispered. They come to camp. Thomas straightened. Bad men? Ayanna nodded slowly. Her voice trembled. They take things. They hurt. I run. Her hands tightened around the blanket, and she looked down, shamed for reasons Thomas didn't understand. So that was the fear behind her eyes. She had not only been lost, she had been escaping danger. Thomas felt a calm strength rise inside him. You're safe here, he said firmly. No one will hurt you. Ayanna looked up again, her eyes filled with something warm trust. She believed him, even though they had just met. For the next hour, they talked little. Ayanna rested while Thomas kept the lantern filled and checked the area outside quietly. Each time he opened the tent flap, she watched him closely, waiting for his reaction. But he saw nothing worrying. No shadows. No tracks. No sounds. Still deep inside, he felt something. A quiet warning, the kind that came from experience. He returned inside and sat down. Ayanna was half asleep, wrapped in both blankets, looking peaceful for the first time. Outside, the wind slowed. The night grew still, but Thomas stayed awake a little longer. Something about Ayanna's story told him the night wasn't over. He didn't know when the danger would arrive, or from where, but he felt it in his bones. He watched the girl sleep and promised silently to keep her safe until morning. He thought she'd come only for warmth, but the truth was deeper. And the real danger, was still out there in the dark. The night felt heavier as the wind pushed against the tent walls, making the canvas shake softly like a living thing breathing in the dark. Thomas sat near the small lantern, its warm glow touching his face with a soft golden color. Across from him sat Ayanna, her thin blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Even though she had warmed up a little, he could see from her eyes that the cold was not the only thing troubling her. Fear still lived behind her silence. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sounds came from the crackling of tiny embers in the lantern and the wind brushing against the tall pines outside. Finally, Ayanna lifted her head. Her voice was soft, unsure, and her English broken, but Thomas leaned forward to catch every word. They came. At night, she whispered, bad men. Thomas kept his face calm, though his heart tightened. He knew the land well, and he knew what kind of people roamed through the lonely parts of the frontier. People without rules. People who took what they wanted. He encouraged her gently. Take your time. Tell me what happened. Ayanna looked down at her hands. Her fingers tightened around the blanket. She explained slowly, using both words and gestures. She had been with her family in their winter resting place, where they stayed until the early spring. They had made a small camp near the river, thinking it was safe. But just before dawn, a group of outlaws came. They were not after her people specifically. They just wanted supplies, blankets, horses, and anything valuable. Her family tried to flee, but everything happened too fast. Iana became separated while escaping into the forest. Her voice trembled as she explained that she had been running ever since. She had not slept properly. She had hardly eaten. She had no proper clothing against the cold storm that struck the day before. And worst of all, she said the outlaws were searching for anyone who escaped. Just to silence witnesses, Thomas listened carefully. He felt a calm strength grow inside him, the same feeling he always had when someone needed help. He did not speak for a moment, but when he did, his voice was steady and reassuring. "You're safe here," he told her. "I won't let anyone hurt you. Not tonight. Not ever." Iana looked up, and this time her expression held something new trust. Still small, still scared, but real, Thomas handed her a tin plate with warm food he had prepared earlier. She ate slowly, grateful for every bite. He watched her, understanding how exhausted she must have been. It was not simple fear. It was the kind that builds after too many long days and nights running alone. But before he could say anything else, a sudden, sharp sound broke through the night. Hoof. Very faint at first, but growing clearer. Thomas froze. Iana immediately stiffened, her blanket falling slightly as she strained her ears. Her eyes widened in recognition. "Same horses," she whispered. "Same men." Thomas stood up slowly and put a finger to his lips. He reached for his coat and stepped softly toward the tent entrance. He opened just enough of the flap to look outside. The moon was bright, lighting the snow-covered ground in a pale silver glow. Through the trees he saw movement shadows. Shifting and horses walking slowly. 3 men, and they were coming closer. Thomas slipped quietly back inside. Iana was trembling again, not from the cold now, but from memory. He knelt beside her. "They're near," he whispered. "But listen to me. I need you to stay calm. Do exactly what I say." She nodded quickly. He pointed to a small space behind his saddlebags and supply roll. "Hide there. Stay low. Stay quiet." Iana moved quietly, almost soundless, and curled herself behind the gear. Thomas spread a blanket over the bags, making it look like simple supplies piled together. Then another knock hit the winter silence. A man's voice called out, rough and loud. "Hey, anybody in this tent?" Thomas took a deep breath, then stepped outside. He faced the 3 men as calmly as he could. His hands were open and relaxed by his sides, though his heart beat fast beneath his coat. One of the outlaws leaned forward in his saddle. "Evenin', friend? We're looking for someone." His tone held fake friendliness that didn't fool Thomas at all. Thomas answered simply, "I'm alone here." "Alone, huh?" another man said, narrowing his eyes. "We heard someone run through this area earlier. A girl? Maybe you saw her?" Thomas shook his head. "The only tracks I saw were my own." The outlaw on the left tilted his head. "Mind if we take a look inside your tent?" Thomas felt the air grow tight around him. He kept his voice calm. "It's cold, and my fire is dying. I'd rather you let me get back inside." But the outlaws were not satisfied. One dismounted and stepped closer. He tried to brush past Thomas. Thomas moved into his path not aggressively, but firmly. "I said I'm alone." The man stared at him for a long second. The other 2 shifted on their horses, clearly impatient. Finally, the dismounted outlaw smirked. "Relax. We'll be back. Ain't safe camping alone out here." Thomas watched them ride away, but he didn't move until the sound of their horses faded into the forest. Only then did he slip back into the tent. Iana emerged from behind the bags, her breaths fast and short. She looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "They know," she whispered. "They come back." Thomas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Not tonight," he said softly. "They're just searching the area. They won't find you. And even if they come back, I'll handle it." She looked at him with confusion and amazement. "Why help me?" she asked quietly. "You know me." Thomas sat down across from her, his expression thoughtful. "Because someone should. Because you deserve safety. Because if I don't help you, who will?" Ayanna lowered her head, touched by his simple kindness. For the first time since she had entered his tent, she did not look toward the entrance with fear. Instead, she looked directly at Thomas with gratitude shining in her eyes. They talked for a long time, softly so as not to carry sound outside. Ayanna explained more about her family and how her older brother had gone hunting the day before the attack. She believed he was still alive somewhere on the other side of the forest. She spoke of him with deep respect. He had always protected her. Thomas listened with full attention. The more she spoke, the more determined he became. He knew the outlaws would not stop searching. And he also knew Ayanna could not keep running alone, not without food or rest. "We'll find your brother," Thomas said at last. "We'll leave before sunrise." Ayanna's eyes widened. "You come with me?" Thomas nodded. "Yes, I won't leave you alone." She sat silent for a moment, digesting his words. Then a small, gentle smile appeared on her face. It was the first real smile he had seen from her. Inside the tent, the lantern lights softened, and the wind outside calmed. The night no longer felt as sharp and dangerous as it had a few moments earlier. Ayanna drew her blanket around her and sat closer to the lantern. Comforted by the warmth, Thomas checked his supplies, planning quietly. He counted the food, the water, the matches, and made sure his horse would be ready before sunrise. He moved calmly, not wanting to make her nervous again. Every movement was slow and steady, like he was preparing for a long journey, because he was. Ayanna watched him, almost surprised at how naturally he took responsibility for her safety. She had never met someone from outside her people who acted with such genuine kindness. As the night grew deeper, the forest became still. Ayanna finally drifted toward sleep, her body giving in to exhaustion. Thomas stayed awake a little longer, listening carefully to any sound outside. His mind was clear. The outlaws were the heat. The danger was real. And Ayanna needed someone to stand with her. He was ready. He would protect her until she found her family again. And if the outlaws returned at dawn, they would find a man who had already decided he would not step aside. The tent felt warmer not because of the lantern, because Ayanna was no longer alone. And Thomas, though a simple man, living a simple life, felt a new purpose rising inside him like quiet fire. The sky was still dark when Thomas opened his eyes. The cold of the early morning crept into the tent, making the air crisp and sharp, but he did not mind. He was already awake, listening carefully to the distant sounds of the forest. For a moment, everything seemed peaceful, the gentle rustling of pine branches, the soft breathing of Ayanna still asleep, and the slow crackle from the tiny lantern that flickered its last bit of warmth. But Thomas knew peace was only temporary. The outlaws would return. They had the look of men who didn't let go of a trail easily, and they would never believe that Thomas was traveling alone. He didn't know how long they would take to circle around, but he did know one thing. Before the sun rose, they needed to leave. He looked at Ayanna, still wrapped in his blanket. Her face turned toward the faint glow of the lantern. She looked calmer now, not tense like she was the night before. For a moment, Thomas allowed himself to feel relieved. At least she had rested. At least she had one peaceful night. He quietly packed his supplies as bedroll. Leftover food, matches, tin cups, and the small rope he always kept on hand. He moved softly, not wanting to wake her too soon. But when he rolled up the blanket that covered his saddlebags, Ayanna stirred. She blinked sleepily and sat up. "You awake early," she whispered. Pulling the blanket closer around her shoulders, Thomas gave her a small smile. "We need to leave before the outlaws return." Ayanna nodded. She did not ask questions. She trusted him now, entirely and without hesitation. She slipped out from the blanket and sat beside him as he tied the straps of his bags. Her movements were stronger this morning, her eyes brighter. Rest had given her strength. Outside, the darkness was thinning. The sky slowly shifted from deep black to a pale indigo. In another hour, the sun would rise. Thomas stepped out first, checking the trees. The forest was still. No voices, no hoofbeats, no danger yet. He gestured for Ayanna to follow. They packed their horse quietly. Thomas helped Ayanna onto the saddle, and though she tried to sit tall and brave, He could see the tiredness in her body. She needed food and warmth. She needed her family. Once everything was ready, Thomas took the reins and led the horse into the forest path. They moved slowly at first, letting the horse adjust to the uneven ground. Ayanna held onto the saddle, looking around as if searching for familiar signs. Thomas spoke softly. "We'll head toward the river. You said your brother went hunting near there, right?" Ayanna nodded. "Yes, he's strong. Maybe he looked for me." Thomas hoped so. A brother searching for his sister would not stop until he found her, and if he was alive, Yana would be safe again. As they continued deeper into the forest, Thomas kept listening for danger. His ears caught every snap of a twig, every flutter of birds' wings. The cold air carried sound easily. He wanted to stay ahead of anything that might come behind them. For the first hour, the journey was quiet. Ayanna pointed out certain trees, old paths, and rocks she recognized from earlier travels with her family. Thomas mentally marked each direction she indicated, but as they neared the river, Thomas stopped suddenly. Ayanna looked down at him. "What wrong?" Thomas knelt and touched the ground. In the thin layer of snow, he saw something through fresh ones. He examined them carefully. The edges were sharp, not softened by wind or melting. "Someone had passed through recently, very recently," Ayanna whispered, her voice uneven. "Outlaws." Thomas shook his head slowly. "Not sure. Could be hunters. Could be your people." Ayanna quietly hoped for the second answer. Thomas guided the horse forward again, but with more caution this time. They moved deeper into the trees until they reached the riverbank. The sound of running water filled the air. Stronger than the wind, Thomas stopped again. Near the water's edge, he saw footprints, human footprints, and they were headed downstream. Then something else caught his eye. A broken arrow. Not from outlaws. From Apache hunters. Ayanna saw it too, and gasped softly. "My people," she whispered. "My brother used arrows like that." Thomas gave her a reassuring look. "Then we're close." But before they could move again, a sudden rustle sounded behind them, sharp, fast, too big to be an animal. Thomas turned quickly and placed a steady hand on the horse, calming it. Ayanna held her breath. They both watched the trees carefully. Then, from behind a thick pine trunk, a figure stepped out, an Apache hunter. He held a bow in his hands, arrow not drawn, but ready. His eyes were sharp, scanning both Thomas and Ayanna. There was strength in his posture, the kind of strength that comes from living close to the land. Ayanna gasped, "Brother." At her voice, the hunter's expression changed. He lowered his bow immediately and rushed forward. Ayanna slid off the horse and ran to him. They embraced tightly, both relieved and overwhelmed. Thomas stepped back. Giving them space, the hunter named Toka held Ayanna with deep emotion. He touched her face gently, checking she was unharmed. When he finally looked up at Thomas, gratitude filled his eyes. "You protect her?" Takota asked, his voice strong but respectful. Thomas nodded. "She came to my camp last night. She needed help." Takota placed a hand over his heart in Apache gesture of sincere thanks. "You do good thing. She's safe because of you." Ayanna spoke softly to her brother in her own language. Thomas could not understand the words, but he could see the relief in Takota's face. After a moment, Takota turned to him again. "You come with us," he said simply. "You are a friend." Ah! But before Thomas could reply, a sound echoed in the distance. OFBEATS. Not slow. Not calm, fast like men searching desperately. Thomas stiffened. Ayanna grabbed her brother's arm. Dakota's expression hardened instantly. He whispered something to Ayanna in their language, then motioned for Thomas to follow him into the trees. They moved quickly, climbing up a narrow trail hidden behind thick bushes. From there, they had a clear view of the riverbank below, and then they saw them. The same three outlaws. Riding hard, searching, they stopped near the water, looking around angrily. One man jumped off his horse and examined the ground. He picked up the broken arrow, cursed loudly, and threw it aside. They close, one outlaw said. I know it. Dakota quietly signaled to Thomas and Ayanna to stay low. He scanned the area with trained eyes. His face showed no fear, only calm readiness. Minutes passed slowly. Thomas kept his hand on Ayanna's shoulder, making sure she stayed steady. The outlaws circled the area a few more times before riding deeper into the forest. Following the river downstream, only after their hoofbeats faded into silence did Dakota stand again. We go to our camp, he said firmly. My people help you. Ayanna nodded quickly, still shaken by how close danger had come. Thomas simply agreed. Staying alone in the forest now was too risky. They walked deeper into the land until the trees opened into a valley where several Apache families had gathered. When they saw Ayanna, they rushed toward her, calling her name with relief. Her people embraced her with warmth, holding her hands, touching her hair, thanking the spirits for her return. Ayanna looked back at Thomas with a smile filled with gratitude. You saved me, she whispered. I never forget. Dakota placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. Our people honor you. You brave. You protect one of us without fear. You always welcome here. Thomas felt a deep warmth inside him. He had not helped her for reward or praise. He had simply done what he believed was right. But standing here, seeing Ayanna safe with her family, he felt something shift within him. This journey had changed both of them. Later in the day, as the sun finally rose high enough to warm the valley, Ayanna approached Thomas again. She held something in her hands, a small handcrafted token made of woven grass and decorated with tiny feathers. This for you? She said. Gift. You protect me in dark when I alone. Thomas accepted the gift with quiet respect. Thank you, he said softly. I'm glad I could help. Ayanna smiled gently. You bring heat, not from fire. From kindness, Thomas felt a calm strength rise in him. He looked around the valley at the people, at the land. At the girl he had helped without expecting anything in return. The world felt different now. Warmer, brighter. As he prepared to leave later that afternoon, Ayanna and her brother walked with him to the edge of the valley. Where you go now? Ayanna asked softly. Thomas smiled. Wherever the trail takes me. But I'll remember this place. Dakota nodded. And we remember you. Ayanna lifted her hand in farewell. Her smile was peaceful now. No fear left in her eyes. She was home, safe, alive. Thomas tipped his hat, turned his horse toward the fading light, and began to ride. He had thought the girl only wanted warmth from a simple tent, but instead she brought courage, purpose, and a fire that burned quietly inside him. Fire made of kindness. It's not danger, and he would carry that warmth with him for the rest of his days.